They became involved with someone else. Not because you were not enough, not because you were easy to replace. Sometimes people walk toward what feels familiar instead of what feels deeply real. Looking back now, they may be carrying thoughts they can no longer push aside. What they want to express is not simple. It is not comfortable either. Even while they were building another chapter of life, there may have been a quiet part of them that never completely let go of what the two of you shared. That possibility has become harder for them to ignore. Have you ever felt like a connection never truly disappeared? Even when everything on the outside seemed finished, something inside still felt incomplete. Some experiences leave that kind of mark. They are not trapped in the past, but they remain in a place where unanswered feelings quietly wait for clarity. Real connections do not always vanish overnight. Sometimes they stay beneath the surface, waiting until someone is finally ready to face them honestly. If this message speaks to you, stay with me until the end, because what comes next may help explain why some people return only after life has taught them difficult lessons. At that time, they may have chosen what felt safe instead of what felt deeply true. They moved toward what was familiar instead of following the quiet voice inside that asked for more courage. It felt easier to stay where life was predictable than to step into something that could truly change them. They told themselves that comfort meant peace. For a while, that belief seemed enough. Yet, a small question kept returning. Was comfort really the same as happiness? They stayed where emotions asked very little from them. They stayed where they could remain in control without facing their deepest fears. But somewhere inside, there was a steady feeling that something meaningful had been left behind. Something that would have required honesty, vulnerability, and real emotional growth. Once that thought appeared, it did not disappear. It stayed quietly in the background, waiting for moments when life became still enough that it could no longer be ignored. Keep watching, because this is where many people begin to recognize what they truly lost. That quiet awareness slowly became impossible to escape. It appeared during peaceful evenings when distractions faded away. It surfaced in the silence after conversations ended. It showed up during ordinary moments when nothing else demanded attention and their own thoughts became impossible to outrun. The feeling never shouted. It did not demand attention. Instead, it remained calm, steady, and surprisingly persistent. It quietly reminded them that some emotions cannot be solved simply by moving on. No matter how busy they became, that unfinished feeling continued to follow them. It influenced the way they looked at new experiences. It changed how they reacted to everyday moments. Even when life seemed normal from the outside, something inside kept asking difficult questions. Had they walked away from something that truly mattered? Had fear made a choice that their heart was still trying to understand? Those questions became harder to silence as time passed. And that is often when people begin to see their past with completely different eyes. As the days continued, routine slowly replaced excitement. Everything worked well enough, yet very little inspired real growth. Life became easier to predict, but harder to truly feel. They started noticing that they had been hiding parts of themselves just to keep everything simple and manageable. Challenges had been traded for comfort. Deep conversations had become ordinary exchanges. What once felt secure slowly began to feel limiting. They realized that avoiding emotional risk had also meant avoiding emotional growth. Looking back, they could finally see that choosing the easier path did not automatically lead to peace. Sometimes it only delayed important truths. That realization did not arrive all at once. It grew quietly through ordinary days until it became impossible to overlook. And when someone reaches that point, they often begin asking themselves the questions they once tried so hard to avoid. Stay until the end. Because the next part explores why some people only understand the value of a connection after enough time has passed for them to see it with completely different eyes. They kept avoiding the difficult questions. They stepped away from stronger emotions and from situations that could have challenged who they really were inside. Little by little, this created a quiet distance within them. They were living their life, but they may not have felt fully connected to it. Everything continued on the surface. Yet, Something deeper remained untouched. As time passed, that quiet feeling became harder to ignore. The relationship they built with someone else may have looked steady from the outside, but appearances do not always tell the full story. It may not have carried the same emotional depth or lasting meaning that they once experienced with you. Some connections leave a lasting impression because they encourage growth, honesty, and vulnerability. Those experiences do not simply disappear because time passes or because someone walks away. Instead, they often remain quietly in the background, returning in unexpected moments without asking for attention. They do not create dramatic scenes. They simply remind a person that something meaningful once existed. If this resonates with you, stay until the end. Because the next part explores why some people only recognize the value of a connection after they have spent enough time away from it. At some point, they may have stopped convincing themselves that everything was completely settled. This was probably not one dramatic breakthrough or one unforgettable moment. It was more likely a slow and honest process that unfolded over many ordinary days. They may have realized that something important had been missing for a long time, even if they could not clearly describe it before. Looking back, they may have seen that moving forward physically is not always the same as finding emotional closure. Certain questions remained unanswered. Certain feelings never fully disappeared. Recognizing that possibility was not comfortable. It required looking at past choices without making excuses or hiding behind familiar habits. That kind of honesty is rarely easy, but it often becomes the beginning of real growth. Comment still here if you have ever felt that some connections remain unfinished long after two people have gone their separate ways. Keep watching because what comes next may explain why some memories continue to return even after someone believes they have moved on. Over time, they may have realized that the connection deserved more openness than they were able to offer back then. Not because it lacked meaning, but because it required a level of emotional courage they had not yet developed. Real closeness asks people to lower their defenses. It asks them to risk disappointment, face uncertainty, and allow themselves to be seen without hiding behind emotional walls that can feel overwhelming for someone who is not ready. Instead of stepping toward that uncertainty, they may have stepped away from it, choosing what felt safer at the time. Yet, even after making that choice, the questions remained. Looking back now, they may understand that what felt like protection also prevented deeper growth. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept is not losing a relationship, but realizing how fear influenced important decisions. That understanding often changes the way people view both their past and themselves. Stay with me, because this final part brings everything together in a way many people never expect. Today, they may see those experiences from a different perspective. It may become clear that what they struggled with was not simply another person, but parts of themselves they were not prepared to face. That realization can quietly reshape how someone understands their past, their choices, and what truly mattered along the way. It is rarely a dramatic transformation. More often, it is a calm and lasting shift that continues to influence future decisions. Once people recognize the ways fear or avoidance shaped their lives, it becomes difficult to ignore those patterns again. Whether they decide to reconnect or continue their own journey, that awareness remains part of who they are. Most importantly, remember this. Another person's emotional readiness is not a measure of your worth. Their decisions reflected where they were in their own personal journey, not your value as a human being. If this message gave you something to think about, type yes below, because the next part explores why certain connections continue to leave a lasting impact long after life seems to move in a different direction. Now they may be living with the results of the choices they made. They carry the weight of the conversations they avoided, the feelings they delayed, and the questions they never fully answered. Whether they ever speak about it or not, that can become one of the most lasting consequences of any important decision. It is not always about a dramatic return or an emotional confession. More often, it is a quiet realization that grows stronger over time. Some connections leave a lasting impression because they encourage people to become more honest with themselves. Those experiences cannot always be covered by distractions, busy routines, or emotional distance. Looking back, they may realize that their decisions were shaped more by their own fears and emotional readiness than by your worth as a person. The hesitation, the inconsistency, and the emotional distance may have reflected an internal struggle rather than a simple lack of care. As time passed, facing those fears may have brought a different kind of clarity. It is not an easy clarity. It can feel heavy, honest, and impossible to dismiss with simple explanations. Stay with me because the next part explores why self-awareness often arrives long after important opportunities have passed. With that growing awareness, they may begin seeing certain moments from a completely different perspective. They may recognize the impact that silence, mixed signals, or emotional distance can have on someone who simply wanted honesty, consistency, and genuine effort. That understanding rarely arrives all at once. Instead, it develops quietly through reflection, experience, and personal growth. It stays in the background, returning during calm evenings, ordinary conversations, and moments when life becomes quiet enough for honest thoughts to surface. Those memories do not demand attention. They simply remain present. They gently remind a person of the choices they once believed were protecting them, but may have prevented deeper connection instead. This realization is not necessarily about asking for another chance or trying to change what has already happened. It is more about accepting responsibility for the past with greater maturity than before. If this message connects with your own experience, keep watching because the final part brings together the lesson many people only understand after enough time has passed. They may also come to appreciate the courage it took for someone to remain emotionally open, to ask difficult questions, and to value honesty instead of uncertainty. Looking back from a place of greater self-awareness can create both respect and regret at the same time. Respect for the strength they now recognize in another person, and regret for not being able to meet that same level of openness when it mattered most. Those feelings are often quiet rather than dramatic. They may appear during late-night reflection, in peaceful moments without distractions, or when familiar memories unexpectedly return. They become gentle reminders of conversations left unfinished, opportunities that slipped away, and emotions that were never fully expressed. None of this changes the past, but it can change how someone understands it. Sometimes the greatest lesson is realizing that emotional avoidance protects comfort for a while, but rarely creates lasting peace. Long lesson often stays with people long after the situation itself has ended. Most importantly, remember this. Another person's emotional journey should never become the measure of your value. If someone was not ready to meet you with honesty, consistency, or openness, that reflects where they were in their own growth at that time. Looking back, they may finally understand that meaningful connections cannot always be replaced simply by choosing a different path. Some experiences continue to shape people because they reveal important truths about themselves. Whether they decide to reconnect or simply carry those lessons forward is something only they can choose. What matters most for you is recognizing your own worth and continuing to move forward with confidence and self-respect. If this message gave you a new perspective, share it with someone who may be searching for understanding after a difficult relationship. Sometimes clarity is not about changing the past. Sometimes it is about finally seeing it for what it was and allowing that understanding to become the beginning of something healthier and stronger. Looking back, they may realize that the person they struggled most to fully open up to was you. That possibility now carries a weight they can no longer easily push aside. Whether they ever say those words aloud or keep them to themselves, the experience may have changed the way they understand connection, honesty, and emotional presence. They may see things differently now. Even if the past cannot be changed, and even if they never act on these feelings, the lessons remain. Some people only understand the value of a meaningful connection after enough time has passed for honest reflection. They may no longer see you as simply another chapter in their story, but as someone who represented something deeper than they were ready to accept back then. That understanding can stay with a person, quietly shaping future decisions whenever real emotional closeness appears again. What happens next is no longer only about their journey. It is also about yours, your choices, your clarity, your ability to stay grounded in your own values and self-respect. Take a moment to reflect on everything you have learned through your own experiences. Trust your instincts. Trust the wisdom you have gained along the way. Stay with me because the next part reveals why personal growth often changes both people, even when their paths no longer look the same. Sometimes a person may appear fully committed to a different direction in life while still carrying unresolved emotions they never completely understood. That does not automatically mean they want to return or change the past. It simply shows how complex human emotions can be. Fear often influences important decisions more than people realize in the moment. Fear of vulnerability, fear of emotional closeness, fear of losing control, fear of facing difficult truths about themselves. Those fears can lead someone to choose comfort instead of growth or familiarity instead of uncertainty. Looking back later, they may begin to recognize that some choices were shaped more by those fears than by a clear understanding of what truly mattered. Certain memories may continue to return quietly through reflection, unexpected comparisons, or ordinary moments that bring forgotten emotions back into focus. Those experiences do not always disappear simply because life moves forward. Keep watching because this next idea may help explain why some lessons become clearer only after enough time has passed. As reflection grows deeper, regret may become part of that process. Not simply because someone misses another person, but because they begin to understand the influence fear had on their decisions. That awareness often arrives slowly during quiet evenings, peaceful mornings, or moments without distractions. It is rarely dramatic. More often, it develops through honest self-examination and personal growth. A person may start asking themselves difficult questions about opportunities they allowed to pass and conversations they never had the courage to begin. Those questions can remain long after circumstances have changed, yet growth is never limited to only one person. While one individual may be learning to face fear and accept responsibility, the other may also be growing stronger, setting healthier boundaries, valuing self-respect more deeply, and building a life that is no longer dependent on someone else's choices. That is why growth can completely change the future, regardless of whether two people ever reconnect again. Comment real if this message made you reflect on your own journey, because the final part brings everything together. With time, both people may become very different from who they once were. If they ever meet again, the connection would no longer need to be guided by confusion, uncertainty, or emotional dependence. Instead, it could be shaped by greater self-awareness, honesty, and emotional maturity. Even if that meeting never happens, the lessons remain valuable. Some experiences continue to influence the way people understand happiness, trust, and meaningful relationships long after the relationship itself has changed. That does not mean the past controls the future. It simply means important experiences often leave lasting wisdom behind. The most important truth is this: your value has never depended on another person's emotional readiness or ability to recognize what they had. Their journey belongs to them. Yours belongs to you. Keep choosing peace, self-respect, and emotional honesty as you move forward. Those qualities will continue guiding you toward healthier relationships and a stronger future. No matter where someone else's path eventually leads, over time they may begin to see happiness, meaning, and emotional fulfillment in a different way than they once did. That can be why their actions on the outside sometimes seem disconnected from what they are quietly working through inside. There is often a gap between the image people show the world and the emotions they are still trying to understand. This is not always intentional. Sometimes it simply becomes more noticeable as self-awareness grows and honest questions begin to surface. Looking back, they may start recognizing feelings they once pushed aside without fully understanding them. At the same time, your own journey has not stopped. You are no longer standing in the same place emotionally. You have continued growing stronger, becoming more grounded, more self-aware, and more confident in your own value. You have learned to trust your instincts, protect your peace, and move forward with greater clarity than before. Stay with me because the next part explains why this personal growth changes the future. No matter what someone else chooses, this growth matters because it helps prevent old patterns from repeating themselves. If two people ever cross paths again, the connection has a better chance of being guided by maturity instead of confusion, honesty instead of uncertainty, and emotional balance instead of fear. Another important lesson becomes clear through this process. Emotional presence is not measured only by physical closeness. A person can appear fully focused on everyday life while still carrying unresolved thoughts or unanswered questions from the past. Those experiences may quietly return through memories, unexpected comparisons, or moments of reflection that happen without planning. They do not always demand attention, yet they can continue shaping how someone understands relationships, trust, and emotional honesty. Keep watching because the final message may be the most important part of all. In the end, everything comes back to awareness, personal growth, and the courage to face difficult truths. What once seemed confusing may begin to make more sense with time. Looking back, they may understand their fears, their hesitation, and the decisions that influenced their path. Whether or not they ever express those thoughts, the lessons can still become part of who they are. At the same time, you have continued building a stronger version of yourself. You no longer need uncertainty or mixed signals to define your worth. You have learned that peace comes from trusting yourself instead of constantly searching for someone else's reassurance. That change is powerful because it allows future relationships to be built on mutual respect, consistency, and emotional honesty rather than hope alone. Comment below if this message encouraged you to reflect on your own journey, because the final thought brings everything together. What remains now is simple. Keep trusting the growth you have earned through your own experiences. Let your future decisions come from confidence instead of old doubts or unanswered questions. People who truly belong in your life will meet you with honesty, respect, emotional presence, and genuine effort. They will not leave you guessing where you stand. Connections that cannot offer those qualities will naturally fade as you continue moving forward with greater wisdom. Your story is not defined by someone else's timing or emotional readiness. It is shaped by your own strength, your ability to learn, and your willingness to choose relationships that reflect the respect you deserve. If this message spoke to you today, let me know which part touched you the most and subscribe for more conversations about emotional growth, healthy relationships, self-respect, and the quiet lessons that help us build a stronger future. Yeah.